there's a story on the death benefits that just cleared here. This is from the Associated Press that the Senate just approved a bill that was pushed through to be able to pay for those death benefits for our soldiers, and now it heads to the president's desk. This is an amazing story because I believe, one of the guys who really pushed for it was John Cornyn. I think this is a gift from the progressive left to the progressive right to have them look like heroes on the progressive right. But it is also about one other thing, and I think this is the part you need to pay attention to. They excoriated the budget director, the budget chief of the Pentagon, saying that you looked at the law and you tried to find the most painful cuts. He responded, "I resent your remarks. I had acted on advice of attorneys in our best reading of a loosely worded law." Jay Sekulow is here. He's the president of the ACLJ. And I want to start with you on this, Jay.
Hey, Len.
How are you, sir? When I first saw the story yesterday, I look at the purse strings coming from the House, and I see the president making a deal off the side, and I wonder, how does the president make a deal off the side like this and say, you know what, we're going to pay you later?
You know, it brings up an interesting issue, and it shows the politics of this, because the reality is money was appropriated despite the budget director of the Pentagon saying he was seeking advice of counsel. The reality is the Pentagon had the ability to pay for this without any problem whatsoever, and what they did was try to create a political statement. You know, the president said he wants it to be painful for Republicans, and this way they'll feel the pressure. That's going to keep the pressure on. This one just happened to backfire, because the administration's taken, over the last 24 hours, a tremendous amount of flack for what they've done. And now the House has passed the bill. The Senate, as you just indicated, has now passed it. The president, though, has indicated that he's not signing these pieces of piecemeal legislation. So instead, we've got an outside party, and nothing against the Fisher House. I think they're trying to help here. But it brings an outside party in, which may be legal, but it makes no sense when the money is allocated and appropriated and can be spent to protect our men and women and their families now of those who have served our country.
Okay, so let me go to a couple of other things. Something else that didn't really make a lot of news yesterday was this: the head of the IRS and the Obamacare factory was sharing personal information, tax information, with the White House and the political arm of the White House.
Right.
None of this is supposed to happen. And I really don't see anybody talking about this. Can you explain what this is all about?
Well, let me tell you what this is. It's called a crime. 6103 of the Internal Revenue Code, and these were what's called 6103 disclosures, are when taxpayer information is shared with a party that's not entitled to those records by law. The White House was not entitled to those records, certainly not the political division of the White House. And what this was the higher-ups in the IRS giving information to the White House regarding HHS and Obamacare enforcement. And this is precisely what is not allowed at law. And by the way, Glenn, it's a crime. So if you're convicted of violating what's called Section 6103 or a 6103 disclosure, you can go to jail for 5 years for each offense. Now, this comes on the heels of the IRS acknowledging that they, in fact, gave information, Lois Lerner, to the Federal Election Commission, who is also not entitled to the information. And that came on the heels of the IRS acknowledging that they were publishing donor records and donor lists and giving them to outside third parties. Again, a violation of 6103. You know, we're representing 41 groups in litigation against the IRS, and we're having to amend the complaint, Glenn, for the third time in about 3 months, because so many revelations are coming out. And what the IRS has done here is unconscionable. The politicization of this is outrageous. And I think at the end of the day, it's either resting with the White House or the White House and the Office of Chief Counsel for the IRS, perhaps both.
Does anybody go to jail on this?
I think so. It'll be interesting if Lois Lerner is given immunity here. And if she is given immunity, it will be for the purpose of getting information that points to higher up. She would have to make a proffer. There's a lot of talk that discussion is going on right now. And frankly, I'm not opposed to her getting immunity, because I think this is a lot higher than Lois Lerner. Ingram, who testified yesterday, was her superior. But imagine this. The head of the tax-exempt division is now over Obamacare enforcement. That should be a chilling thought for anybody that's concerned about confidentiality or privacy of records. And you've got intergovernmental sharing to political offices. This is really unheard of. I think this dwarfs anything we've seen in our lifetime as far as direct violations of the law ongoing by a government agency.
So, Jay, I can't help but, I mean, look what they did with the unions. They let them build a stage while they were pushing around 91-year-olds. They don't care about the violations of the IRS, all these things that are going on. It's gravely concerning to me because either they are just out of control, arrogant, or they know something that I don't know. What is happening? How is all of this? What are they doing?
I think the administration thinks, Glenn, number one, I think this is intentional. I don't think, they're trying to get information now. There's going to be a House Oversight Committee, Natural Resources Committee hearing next week on who was it in the administration that ordered the closing of these national monuments. And when you look at the World War II monument, now I've litigated a lot of free speech cases at the Supreme Court of the United States, but closing an open-air monument, paying money to bring in barricades when it's open access all the time, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. So we sent a threat of a lawsuit, which we were prepared to file against the National Park Service. They responded by opening up the areas to free speech, which is basically everything. But the point is, these are intentional acts. I think the president is trying to inflict on the American people as much pain as he possibly can to show how outrageous this, quote, government shutdown, end quote, is, when the reality is these are problems of the government's own making. And I really do think it's backfiring. It doesn't mean that there's an end in sight here either, by the way. I think the longer this goes, we had the private businesses that were having their driveways, guarded by national park personnel and police so that they couldn't have business. Those have been lifted, at least in the western North Carolina area. But this goes on, and I think it's just this government out of control. But, Glenn, for one moment, I don't think this is, just happenstance or, somebody called our radio broadcast today and said, I can't believe the president's naive. I said, this isn't naive. These are intentional acts to try to inflict pain on the American people. It's for political points. It's just in the last 48 hours or so, it's backfired on the White House. But these are intentional acts. Rest assured, the government knows exactly what they're doing here. It's just in the process, they're willing to violate the First Amendment.
Jay, I can't thank you enough for what you and your firm does. I mean, we'd be doomed without you, and thank you for being on the wall, and we'll talk again.